Councillor Murray online? You're on mute, Councillor Murray.
Sorry about that. I couldn't hear anything, but I can hear you now clearly. Thank you.
Thank you. Item number 2 is declaration of interest. Members are asked to declare any interest they may have in any items of the agenda. It would be helpful if members explained why they are declaring an interest in the item concerned. Do we have any declaration of interest? No. Thank you. With regarding procedures for today's meeting, any motion or amendment in relation to a planning application must be based solely on planning reasons. If a member moves an amendment, the chair will invite him or her to clearly articulate the amendment and the planning reasons upon which it is based. Thereafter, the chair may, at his discretion, continue the business of the meeting in accordance with the time-out protocol. A copy of the protocol has been made available to all members via the Planning Applications Board folder on SharePoint. The Planning Manager for the Development Management Team will present the recommendation of officers. In the event of a member seeking to move an amendment, the chair may call upon the legal advisor or the planning advisor to provide advice to the board. Item number 3 on today's agenda is a planning application for the formation of an access track at Meavig Uig, Isle of Lewis. This planning application has been a subject of more than 6 representations and therefore, in accordance with the scheme of delegation, is referred to the board for a decision. And can I now invite Morag Ferguson to speak to the report?
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, members. As the Chair says, this is a planning application to form an access track to service existing Scottish Water storage distribution, which is sited on a hill at Meavig, Uig in the Isle of Lewis. The intention is to create the track in order to provide a connection through to the public road. The track is approximately 500 metres in length and with a width of approximately 2.5 metres. The intention is that it's be formed with crushed aggregate, and it would. The intention is that it would only be suitable for use by ATV or quad bike. This here is just the location plan. The site is identified in red there and includes sufficient working area to construct the track, which would be a much narrower corridor within that red area. In terms of location, at the bottom is the main road coming in from Achmore towards Meavig, where the pier is. And if you were to go straight ahead to Timscary and over to Uig Sands, the track is to be taken off the spur of the road that travels north towards Reef. And there is a small collection of houses, church, doctor surgery, which you can see on that location plan to the right. It's just an aerial image that shows the location again. So the mirrors pretty much what's on the location plan. So you've got Valtasneep and Reef to the headland to the right there. The road, you can see the 3 red dots is the location of the proposed track, and the road that runs through the glen at Meavig is the kind of Glen Valtas road running over to the main parts of Uig. However, in the report, Glen Valtas is a site of special scientific interest for geological grounds, and this slide just shows the extent of the SSSI. The proposed site is, you can see just to the right of the slide as you travel. It's actually the marking I've got is actually sitting a wee bit low adjoins the road slightly higher than that. But that lets you see the extent of the SSSI. So just in terms of context, the track would incline fairly steeply from the Meawick to Reef Township Road. There would be a requirement for either bitmac or concrete as stipulated by roads for the first 3 metres of the track from the edge of the road. And it would then travel up alongside the fence and across the hillside and then onto an area of elevated but relatively open level moorland. The water distribution tank and the application site are all within the South Lewis and Harris and North Uist National Scenic Area. And I mentioned the Glenvalta site of special scientific interest, and that the boundary of that is within 100 metres of the proposed access. The site itself is to do with geology. It's a subglacial channel that was eroded by meltwater flowing at pressure beneath the Hebridean ice cap, and it's also identified as a geological conservation review site, and that pretty much underpins or mirrors the SSI designation. And the site itself for the track is on common grazing land. This is just a site plan that kind of just illustrates the kind of design and length of the track. So starting on the right hand side beside the public road, the track would leave the road and at an rise along the fence line at an angle, and then it would come inland a bit just to manage the gradient. And when it reaches that main fence line at the back of the village, it would then have another couple of loops as it climbs up the gradient, and then would move fairly level across the open moor with a slight incline all the way till it reaches the tank. The actual at the main fence, you'll see like a gate and stock fence in the cross section of the side there. So that would be like a new gate that would go where the main fence is, just after the first quarter of the track, and the inset cross section just shows that it would be basically a track built up of some aggregate. So these are just some photographs that just kind of show the location. So where the arrow is here is where the track would leave the main road. You can see there's a couple of water gullies to take surface water on the side of the road there, with a kind of concrete head wall. So the track would basically head up at an angle, pretty much following that fence that you can see just between the trees, just almost above the roof of the car. And as you climb a bit higher, this is looking back down towards the public road. And you can see the harbour and just further along there. This is again as you climb even higher on the track, coming up towards the tank, and you can see the roof of the church in Meawick there on the left. And then this is just like the expanse of moorland that the track would cross, going to the tank. And then this is just a picture taken behind the tank, looking back down the way. That concludes the presentation. If I just take members to the report. The report recommends approval subject to conditions of the planning application. The key issues raised through the various representations are just the principle of having an access track in this location, adverse landscape and visual impacts, safety concerns, impact on neighbouring properties, and impact on common grazing land. In addition to the representations which are included in your report, we received 2 further representations this morning. Neither of those raise new issues. One is from a neighbour who's previously submitted representations, and the other from the landowner. The conclusion and recommendation are for approval subject to the conditions that will mitigate the adverse effects, and the conditions are set out in Appendix 1 to the report. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Mauric Ferguson and Ian MacLeod, for that very extensive and comprehensive report. I'd like to open this out to members of the board for any questions or comments. Councillor MacLeod.
Quick question. The tank, the existing, it's a water tank, I take it, is it? How did they used to get there before? I didn't see any signs of a road or anything. How did they used to get there?
Mrs. Ferguson.
We assumed they would walk.
Other questions or comments from members of the board? Well, if you permit me, I'd like to make some comments in relation to this application. As an individual member of this board, I wish to express my concerns relating to the siting of this track, particularly from where it commences off the B8011 on the Meavig Village Road, in relation to its incline and its effect on the local topography. I'm also concerned as to the proximity of the track so close to the backline fence of the property highlighted in the second and third photograph in Appendix 5 of this report. In my view, this proposed route would cause a significant impact on neighbour amenity, coupled with my concerns relating to the local natural heritage of the area being impacted with this junction point situated close to the Glenvaltis geological site of special scientific interest. I therefore wish to propose an amendment refusing this application. And my draft amendment reads as follows: that the application be refused on the basis that the proposed development does not demonstrate a satisfactory quality of placemaking, siting, scale and design that respect and reflect positive local characteristics and will complement or enhance the surrounding natural environment, contrary to policy PD1 of the Outer Hebrides Local Development Plan and the impact on neighbouring amenity in respect of the risk of flooding and landslide adds weight to this consideration. The development would also be contrary to policy NBH2 due to the adverse effects it would have on the Glenvaltis SSI. With that being my proposed amendment, I would like to take advice from the board's legal advisor, who I think is online, Mr. Alan MacDonald. In your view, is that a competent amendment?
Thank you, Chair. Clearly, the report sets out a different viewpoint, but yeah, from my perspective, it is competent. You've set out the policies and the development plan that you've given weight to, and they are planning considerations. So from my perspective, it's competent in that respect, but obviously the report sets out a different perspective.
Thank you, Mr. MacDonald. Can I ask if there's any member of the board in the chamber or online who wishes to support me in seconding this amendment? Vice Chair.
I support that amendment.
Thank you. I therefore wish to enact the timeout protocol and adjourn this meeting for 15 minutes while I and my seconder retire with the clerk of the board, legal advisor and planning officers to further consider the terms of the amendment. So we shall reconvene at 2:30. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. I wish to now reconvene this planning board meeting at item number 3, which is the formation of an access track at Meavig, Uig, Isle of Lewis. We have now returned from our deliberations regarding the amendment in my name, supported by Councillor Johnny McKeever, and I would now like to invite the clerk of the board to read out the draft amendment. Mr. Mackay.
That the application be refused on the basis that the proposed development does not demonstrate a satisfactory quality of placemaking, siting, scale and design that respect and reflect positive local characteristics and will complement or enhance the surrounding natural environment, contrary to policy PD1 of the Outer Hebrides Local Development Plan and the impact on neighbouring amenity in respect of the risk of flooding and landslide adds weight to this consideration.
Thank you, Mr. Mackay. And I now ask the legal advisor to the planning board, Mr. Alan MacDonald, for your advice as to whether that is a competent amendment.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, the comments I made previously stand. You've set out the policies and the weight you've given them. And again, although it is contrary to what the report says, those are your views of the matter and the weight you've given to them. You are entitled to do that. So, yeah, there's no legally, I don't think there's an issue in that regard.
Thank you, Mr. MacDonald. I would now like to ask if there's any member of the board wishing to support the recommendations at paragraph 3.1 in this report. Councillor Murray.
Thank you. Arguments for and against this. This is one of my favourite places in the world, really. This area, the Glen Valterson, you know, it's just a lovely, lovely place. And I just have two observations to make. The first of which is an ArgoCat not able to be used without building a permanent path? That's my first point. Why not an ArgoCat? And my second, we were shown a photograph of Meavig Pier from the site. So presumably if one can see Meavig Pier from the site, Meavig Pier and its users can see the path quite clearly from there. And I would be tending to support Councillor Fraser in this regard. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Murray. With that said, does any member of the board wish to support the recommendations at 3.1 in this report? No in the chamber. Oh, Councillor Finnegan online.
Yeah, I'll support the original motion.
And does anybody, Mr. Mackay?
Yeah. Just to confirm, Councillor Finnegan, that's the recommendations in the report.
That's right, 3.1, yeah.
Thank you.
Does any councillor in the chamber or online wish to second Councillor Finnegan in supporting the recommendations at 3.1? No. Is that Mr. Mackay?
In that case, as there is no seconder, I assume it is a finding of the meeting that the amendment as read has been approved. Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Mackay. Therefore, that planning application has been refused. Moving on to item number 4 on this afternoon's agenda. This is an application to erect a 20-metre lattice telecommunications tower with antennas, dishes, enclosures, cabinets, VSAT dish, and erect 2 wind turbines at 17.4 metres to tip height and install a solar array, erect a 1.8 metre high deer fence and single access gate at Scalavel Hilltop Mast, Morskill, Uig, Isle of Lewis. Now, this application is subject of a formal objection by Nature Scott, a government agency, and therefore, under the terms of the scheme of delegation, is presented to the board for a decision. And I can invite Morag Ferguson to speak to this report.
Thank you, Chair. So this is planning application to erect a 20-metre telecommunications tower with various antenna and dishes. It would be enclosed by a cabinet, and the proposal is that it will be powered by 2 wind turbines, each 17.4 metres to tip, and a solar array. There would also be a deer fence and access gate erected around the compound. The compound would be 10.10 metres in size, and it would contain various ground-based external equipment, a meter cabinet, satellite dish, and it would be enclosed by this 1.8 metre high fence. Each turbine, 17 metres tall, would be sited one to each side of the mast, and there would be a solar array of 42 panels. In total, the solar array would have a length of 25 metres, width of 4.5 metres, and at its highest it would sit 2.5 metres off the ground. There is no access road proposed. The intention would be to access the site by helicopter and ATV. This is just like a elevation just showing the nature of the mast, 20 metres high, with the various dishes and antenna, and the 2 turbines that's proposed to be sited either side. The mast itself enclosed by a stock-proof, deer-proof fence. This plan here just shows the layout plan. So the mast itself is the triangle, black triangle in the centre of the image. Antennas and dishes would be erected at various heights along up the frame. Cabinets that would be within the immediate area, and the fenced compound of 10.10. Then out with that you would have the 2 turbines on either side, and then this bank of solar panels. So the site itself, it's in a remote location, remote area in terms of the spatial strategy. It's on the hilltop of Scalaval, which comprises really of 4 different hilltops. It's 4.5 kilometres south of Kinlochroag, and the actual site area in total extends to just about 1,000 square metres. The ground in that area is fairly typical of moorland. It's exposed to rock with pockets of peat and waterlogged vegetation. The site itself is at an elevated location within the landscape, and there are a range of other prominent hills around it, and also beyond, down towards Harris. The site itself sits within the National Scenic Area and also the Harris Uig Hills Wildland Area. The landscape character type is prominent hills and mountains. On the left is the site location plan that was submitted along with the application. The road at Kinlochroag you can see just at the very top of the left-hand slide in blue. And then the intention is that the track would follow in along the side of Loch Morskill, where there is an existing ATV track, and then would come in and climb up the side of the hill to the position indicated red, where the mast and turbines and solar array would be sited. On the right hand side you can see there are contour map again, Kinlochroag at the top, just where the red arrow enters the page, and Loch Morskill, so the track would follow the side of Loch Morskill and then again follow that existing track, and then it would sweep up to the back of the hill. And then, as you can see, there are a couple of other hilltops in the same range. Now over to the left, just where the almost just due west of the proposed site, you'll see on the map there shieldings. These are Sorry, Fiona, to the left. So these shillings there are the point from which like a visualization was taken. So it's kind of taken side on, which means that you're seeing the long side of the hill rather than the steep side. So we'll just come to that shortly. So this is just like an aerial. It doesn't really just shows you the kind of nature of mountainous moorland ground. Beehive shillings are indicated inside the kind of orange hatched area. The site itself and the yellow star and Kinloch at the top. The slide here just shows like a predicted coverage that from this map, and the actual site itself is where you see the blue arrow, the blue line coming in on the red dot. So that would be the site of the mast. So it's looking really at providing coverage of land rather than villages or property. You can see like the villages in North Harris at the bottom there, going out to Hushinish. Some of the other villages over on the kind of west of Oog, and some of the ones coming down the side of Loch Seaforth. But this would coverage is mainly of this kind of interior area. So as you leave Kinloch and head south, you would come to Loch Morskill, and this is a view of Scalaval Hill from Loch Morskill, and you're kind of following the ATV track, which is just a grass track out here. Say this image was generated by the visualization that was generated for the purposes of illustrating the application. You can actually see the mast and that it's taken side on because the crosshatch takes, but what the view of the applicants was that the turbines would be hidden in the same line at that particular point as the mast, and therefore you'd only see one structure, but the reality is depends on where you view it from. So it isn't terribly helpful as a visualization. Key planning issues with this case were that, first of all, it's in a remote area per the spatial strategy and the proposals on account of their impact on landscape. Significant adverse effect on landscape would be contrary to the key aim of that policy. Following consultation with Nature Scott, this took the view that it would have significant landscape and visual impacts on the special qualities of the National Scenic Area and the wildland area, and they have raised a formal objection in that regard. Further, the bird ornithological information that was submitted in support of the application showed that there was golden eagle present in and around that area, but there was no assessment of the potential impacts likely on that, and golden eagle is a Schedule 1 protected species. There would need to be further data and assessment of that. Further, the Archaeology Service had requested like a desktop assessment and walkover survey to allow consideration of the known and unknown archaeological potential of the area. And again, like there was a fairly limited amount of information submitted in that regard. The recommendation is for refusal on the basis that the proposed development would not comply with policy DS1 of the local development plan, policy NB1 landscape of the development plan, policy NPF 4C, 4F and 4G natural places of national planning framework, would not comply with policy NBH2 of the local development plan on the grounds of natural heritage, and again would not comply with policy 7 historic assets and places or policy NBH5 archaeology, and on account of its siting would not comply with the communications infrastructure policy of the Outer Hebrides Local Development Plan, or NPF4. It's therefore considered that taken in the round, the development would be contrary to the development plan. In terms of determination, as Nature Scott have intimated their wish, intimated an objection under the terms of this circular, which relates to national scenic areas. If the Comhairle would minded to approve the application, it would first be necessary to notify Scottish ministers to provide them with the opportunity to consider whether they wish to call the application in for their determination. Furthermore, because there are identified significant effects arising from the development, as confirmed by the advice of Nature Scott, it would be necessary for the developers to prepare an EIA report, which would go through the statutory processes for an EIA development, and that would need to be submitted before this application could be determined, other than if the application is to be refused. That concludes the presentation. I'm happy to take any questions, Chair.
Can I thank Morag Ferguson and Helen MacDonald for that very good report. I'd like to open this up to the chamber for any questions or comments. Councillor Macaulay.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Morag and team, for the comprehensive report. I'm minded to approve this. There was something one very similar down in Harris, which was very the same sort of reasons were given for non-approval. I note it's only the majority of the coverage is going to be in the hills, if you like. So obviously some of that is going to affect houses and things. It's also going to be a mast that's maybe in the future, with technology, etc., can lead to giving a lot more coverage to the whole of Buig. We don't know what other technology things are ahead of us, but if that mast was there anyway. But the main reason I would like to do it is the amount of hill walkers are out there. A mast there giving coverage in the hills could save a life. And I think that is the most important reason. So from that, I would be minded to approve.
Mrs. Ferguson, would you like to comment on that?
I don't have anything.
Okay. Any other questions or comments? I have a question relating to paragraph 5.4 in the report. It mentions that the developer didn't heed advice from the pre-application stage. Can you comment further on that? And also regarding the lack of a Golden Eagle survey.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, the majority of the masts that we get submitted do come for a very brief pre-application discussion, for want of a better term. They were advised of our concerns about a mast in the area at all, especially of the scale proposed, and exacerbated by the addition of the turbines and the potential issues that would bring in a national scenic and wildland area. And also in terms of the natural heritage, and that they would have to investigate that. A Golden Eagle survey, in very, very general terms, was carried out as part of the overall ecology report that was submitted, provisional ecology report that was submitted, and that identified by the developer's own ecologists that there were at least 2 eagles present in the area, and the nature of their movement patterns would appear that there was an eyrie, a nesting site very close to Scalaval. Confirmed again in Nature Scott's response that they are aware of nesting in that area, and that before they could make any further comment, definitive comment, they need a lot more information. They were given the opportunity to discuss that further with Nature Scott, potentially remove the turbines from the proposal and reconsider, but unfortunately those discussions stalled quite early, and even with prompting, we couldn't quite get them to engage in a proactive way. It was a bit of this is the proposal, and that's what we'd like you to consider. So that's what was done.
Okay, thank you for that, Helen. Also referring to paragraph 9.6, it says here there's a lack of historical environment assessment by the applicant. Can you comment on that, perhaps? Yes, Morag?
That relates to the fact that a development such as this, because of the inclusion of wind turbines, and its location in a sensitive location, needs to go through EIA screening, and the conclusion of the EIA screening following taking advice is that there would be a potential for significant effect on landscape and visual amenity, and therefore a detailed landscape and visual impact assessment would require to be prepared to the established standards for such work, and that would need to be taken through an EIA process.
Okay.
We have not requested that they submit an EIA because our recommendation was that even at this stage, the recommendation based on the kind of wider assessment is that our recommendation would be for refusal.
Thank you for that. Any other questions or comments from members of the board? Vice Chair?
Yeah, well, I would be minded to refuse this for the reasons clearly stated in Appendix 1, from reasons 1 to 4. I think we have enough reasons to refuse this.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Councillor Macaulay.
Just for clarity, Chair, does my proposal, what happens to that? Do I have to get a second, or does it just drop there, or do you ask for a second? Do I ask for a second? Just on procedure wise. Thank you, Chair.
I'll take in Mr. Clark, Mr. Mackay, but I think you have to put forward an amendment. Mr. Mackay?
Yeah, sorry, yes, you would have to clearly put forward an amendment and stipulate the planning grounds. And then I would suggest, after if you find a seconder, that we invoke the timeout procedure again.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Mackay. Are you wishing to put forward an amendment, Councillor Macaulay? Okay. Do you have wording for an amendment, Councillor Macaulay? Mr. Mackay?
I'm assuming that you are saying that the proposal does demonstrate satisfactory siting, and doesn't have the risks to the protected species in terms of the reasons stipulated in the appendix to the report. Along those lines.
Yeah, Councillor Macaulay.
Correct. I think the necessity to have something there to aid hill walkers and people in remote areas outweigh these other factors.
Okay. Can I bring in, first of all, the legal advisor to the planning board, Mr. Alan MacDonald? Would that constitute a competent amendment in your view?
Thank you, Chair. I think I'd actually like to hear potentially from the planning advisor first in that respect, in terms of the policies. Obviously, the policies are set out, the policies of this proposed development, the policies that impact upon this proposed development are set out in the report. So obviously, Councillor Macaulay has a contrary view when he's weighed them in terms of policy. They are set out there, but I'm not sufficiently familiar with those policies to know whether that particular point is dealt with any of them. So I'd be interested to hear if that were possible from the planning advisor.
Yeah. Mrs. Ferguson, what would be the impact to the local authority and the board if we approve this application? Or Mary?
Mary.
Mary.
Thank you, Chair. Given the deficit of information that's here, there would be caution around making a recommendation or, articulating a recommendation till we were able to have all the information that we would still need to go back to the applicant on. Your motion may still carry on that basis, but we'd have to articulate that once we were able to make an informed planning statement around that in relation to your EIA, the other information that's outstanding.
So, Mr. Mackay.
Just to clarify, so are you suggesting that we would have to go back to the applicant, ask for, so that should be the recommendation that the applicant be asked to provide? And I'm sure you can list what these requirements, these policies are. Yeah. About that. Okay. Just so we can formulate an amendment for this, would you find it useful just to have the time out of protocol just now?
Okay.
And do we have a seconder for?
First of all, Mr. Macaulay, are you happy with that to give the applicant more time to provide further information to the planning department? To make an assessment.
I'll have to sit down and see what that incurs, but yes, as soon if that's what the planning planners are recommending us to do, that sounds, that would be what I would want. Yeah. Would it be prudent at the moment to go for a seconder? Or
yes, I'll ask for a seconder.
Would I have it all written down?
Absolutely.
First. Okay, thank you.
Can I formally ask if anybody wishes to second Councillor Macaulay in his amendment proposal? Councillor MacLeod. Seconded by Councillor MacLeod. I shall therefore now enact the timeout protocol. Oh yes, Mary.
Just to clarify, if the motion is counter to what's set out by the planning service already, it wouldn't be for the planning service to then subsequently determine it.
Mm-hmm. Say again.
It wouldn't be for the planning service to subsequently determine it if it's made its determination already.
Yes. So
just to clarify that.
Yes. You happy with that, Councillor Macaulay? Yep. Yeah. For that. Clarify all this at the timeout protocol, which I shall now enact for 15 minutes, and we shall reconvene at 3:15. Thank you.
Let's go to committee room 1.
Good afternoon, everyone. I wish to reconvene this planning board meeting at item number 4. The timeout period has now ended and Councillor Macaulay and Councillor John N. MacLeod have now returned to the chamber. Can I now invite the clerk of the board to read out their amendment?
As the application could be supported on policy grounds, in particular due to the benefits of digital connectivity, including resilience and safety, it is proportionate to defer the determination for the applicant to produce an environmental impact assessment report and any other required supporting documentation to inform the future determination of the application by the board.
Thank you, Mr. Mackay. And at this point, can I first of all ask a member of the planning department to give an informed opinion regarding this amendment from Mrs. Ferguson?
Chair, members of the planning board, this application has been was submitted to us almost a year ago, in June of 2024, and the service has been back and forward looking for additional information, which has not been submitted to a satisfactory standard. The target for determining an application such as this is 2 months. While, you know, it's entirely up to the board if they wish to defer the determination further, my advice would be that that then has an adverse impact on the performance of the planning authority, and that, you know, we're sitting on applications that, you know, that should really be determined one way or other in the public interest. It is within the applicant's power to submit a new application at such time as they've prepared an EIA report. And, you know, I'm not sure that it is proportionate 12 months on to be deferring the determination further. But I accept that that's a decision for the board. The other thing is that we would wish some procedural clarity on how we move forward if the applicant either declines to produce the EIA or produce it in a reasonable period of time.
Thank you, Mrs. Ferguson. Mr. Alan MacDonald online, do you wish to add further to that?
Thank you, Chair. There's nothing in terms of a legal perspective that's it's an issue with what's being requested, but perhaps what Mrs. Ferguson was saying, there could be consideration of setting some sort of deadline on the production of the EIA. I don't know what would be reasonable in that regard. I'd have to take advice of planning on that in that respect.
Thank you, Mr. MacDonald. So we have an amendment in the name of Mr. Ian Macaulay, seconded by Councillor John MacLeod. I am happy to move the recommendations within this report at paragraph 3.1 in that planning permission be refused for the reasons set out at Appendix 1 to this report. Do I have a seconder? Vice Chair.
I will second that.
Thank you. It is my view that we should now go straight to a vote. Do members agree? Yep. That's fine. Can I now bring in the clerk, Mr. Mackay?
Chair, the board have confirmed go straight to the vote on this one. Fine. As we have a number of members online, we will do this by roll call. So either say motion or amendment. The motion are the recommendations in the report as proposed by Councillor Fraser, seconded by Councillor McKeever. And amendment is the amendment that was read out, proposed by Councillor Macaulay, seconded by Councillor John Norman MacLeod. So I'll go through in order. Chair.
Motion.
Vice Chair.
Motion.
Councillor Ian Archie McNeill. Councillor Ian M. MacLeod.
Motion.
Councillor Susan Thompson here. Councillor Mustafa Hussain.
Motion.
Councillor Paul Fillingan.
Motion.
Councillor Robert Mackenzie.
Motion.
Councillor John Norman MacLeod. Councillor Ian M. Macaulay. Yeah. And Councillor George Murray. Councillor George Murray, I think you're still muted, Councillor Murray. Chair, that's 7 for the motion and 2 for the amendment. The motion is carried. The recommendations in the report.
Thank you for that, Mr. Mackay. So for the benefit of the minute, the opinion of the board is that this planning application be refused. Thank you for that. Now moving on to item number 5, the final item of today's meeting. This is a planning application to install a campsite of 25 pitches for motorhomes plus facility buildings, form new access track, improve existing tracks, create new parking area at Clachan Sands, Lochmaddy, Isle of North Uist. This planning application has received more than 6 representations which are considered by the appointed officer to be valid and raising material planning considerations. The application cannot be determined under delegated powers and is therefore presented to the board for a decision. Can I now invite Morag Ferguson to speak to this report?
Thank you, Chair. As the Chair says, this is an application for a campsite, which would be specifically for motorhomes, 25 pitches, a facilities building. There would be an improvement of the existing access track, some extension of those tracks, and a new parking area created. So in terms of location, Clachan Sands is a Mahon beach that's facing northwest, really long beach on the northwest coast of North Uist. It's shown in the red mark on that plan. Location site extends to just over 2.5 acres. It's predominantly Mahar grassland. It is just northwest of the 2 cemeteries, the old cemetery, Clachan Sands Old Cemetery, and the new cemetery, which is currently in use. It is an area that has been used informally for camping for many years, and the access to the area was improved under a coastal access scheme that the Comhairle were involved in about 25 years ago. The land around the wider campsite is actively farmed. It's part of Clachan Farm. There's no existing buildings within the actual application site, and there's no immediately neighbouring buildings. The nearest dwellings are located closer to the junction with the main road, and the site itself is on ecological grounds quite sensitive. It's when the Mahars Rob Newton Site of Special Scientific Interest, the North Uist Mahar Special Area of Conservation, the North Uist Mahar Island Special Protection Area for birds, and it's also within the National Scenic Area. There's just an aerial view. The red dot indicates the proposed location of the campsite. The track, as you can see, is existing up to that point. The square okay, so just in the bottom left where you see like the blue dot, that is the cemetery, the current cemetery, and then just to the left of that is the old cemetery. As you carry along the track between the 2 cemeteries, just when you reach almost like the corner where you see like a small vehicle or something parked, that will be the point at which it's proposed that additional parking would be created. And just as you enter across the track at that area, the intention is that there would be a cattle grid and fence put in at that point. You can see the wider area has been ploughed, and there are some agricultural sheds on the Mahar in that area as well. In terms of the actual location of the campsite, you can see like it's a rocky headland coming out onto the beach, so the actual area itself is like a kind of hard coast in this particular part of the Mahar. So the proposal is to extend the access track and create some formal pitches. In the centre of the site, it's proposed that a amenity building providing showers and toilets will be provided along with waste disposal facilities. And that's a kind of indicative layout of the actual camping pitches. This plan here is just a mirror of what you've already seen, but without the overlay, without the underlay of the aerial. Again, you can see here the facilities building in the middle, bin storage, and drainage septic tank outlined in blue. The blue outline just shows that all the land is within the control of the applicant, and as I said earlier, you can see just where it's proposed that a fence would be erected with a cattle grid entrance just in the bottom quarter there, and then like a parking area would be formed. And the track would rise up to the site. Now this just shows the contours, so you can see like the contours of the land there. Also some raised land to the south of the site that would provide screening from the cemeteries in the wider track, and also kind of like a raised knoll just where on the left hand side, which again the pitches would be formed round about that. This is just like a map showing the plan showing the extent of the surfacing. So the areas outlined in green would be a mesh, like a grid mesh that would be laid on top of the Mahar soil to provide like a hard surface, but without actually having to dig or provide infill. The existing Mahar track would be, which is identified in grey, would be subject to some hardcore infill just to improve it. And the orange areas, again, like where the pitches would be, that would again be a hard mesh that would be placed on top of the grass. So this building fairly standard, profile sheeting to the roof, some cladding to the north facing wall, the rest of it would be rough cast. And in terms of facilities, it would provide both ladies and gents showers and toilets, and also disabled facilities, a small office and storage. Next, there's a series of photos. So the location of the proposed access, this is looking west, so this is just after you pass through between the two graveyards, and just where the road swings, where there's a slight change in the direction of the road there, that's where the area in which the additional car parking would be provided. As you move along the track, that's you kind of coming down onto where the kind of level area on the headland at the moment, and you can see the beach just beyond. This is a second access track that has started to be carved out, because the main access track, which is to the right of the photo, is maybe just not in a condition for certain types of vehicles. So people have started driving on the Mahar itself. And that's one of the difficulties of an area that isn't under any kind of formal control. And then this is a view just off the area that's currently informally used and would be formalised for parking of motorhomes. And there's just another view of the track looking towards the west. This image is taken from the beach, so it's looking back towards the site. There's two vans parked up there when that photograph was taken, and you can see the track just behind the grey van, just swinging up over the hill, and then it dips down behind. So the hillock to the left provides some screening between the proposed site and the local cemeteries. And that's just like a longer view looking again back towards the beach where you can see the two vans, and it just gives you a sense of the nature of the landscape. It's quite low lying. So the key planning issues here, I'll just let members see the slide. So there are concerns over representations raised, concerns over the principle of the development of a campsite in this location and potential impacts on landscape and visual amenity, natural heritage and biodiversity, residential amenity, heritage, roads, flood risk and climate change. There's a total of 12 people made representations. Some of these were repeat representations. These were set out in Appendix 4 to your reports and were summarised in paragraph 10.3 of the report. And the concerns raised pretty much mirror the issues which were on the previous slide as being the key issues that failed to be assessed. So really to do with location, scale of the development, need and tourism impacts, environmental effects, social and economic impacts, access and accessibility. There were also concerns raised about the assessment methodology and procedural matters. All these matters were considered and assessed and addressed as appropriate within the report. In terms of the progress of the application, it was subject to iterative changes during the course of its determination. There was like a archaeological investigation carried out. There was some additional plans and information submitted in response to representations. There were changes made, including the location of the parking area. On account of the site being located within the special area of conservation and the North Uist Machar special protection area for a range of different ornithological species, it was necessary to carry out a screening under the Habitats Regulation appraisal process. Advice was taken from Nature Scott and it was concluded that subject to mitigation measures, which would require the submission and agreement of an access plan and wider grassland management plan, that the effects on the integrity of these designated sites could be avoided. The assessment concludes that the scale of the development, the nature and scale of the development can be accommodated in that location without compromising the special qualities of the visual scenic area. Members are aware planning applications need to be determined in accordance with the provisions of the development plan unless material considerations indicate otherwise. The assessment concludes that the location would be acceptable for the development as proposed and that the siting and design would respect the character and amenity of the surrounding area without detriment to residential amenity or indeed to the local environment. It's concluded that the development would be within the capacity of the environment and proposal is sufficient in terms of access and parking. The site itself is sufficiently elevated. It's not in an area at risk of flood or likely to be affected by coastal change. It is subject to a suite of conditions to manage mitigation measures in relation to the natural and built heritage policies of the plan. So those are the built heritage policies are the archaeological aspects and the natural heritage being the designations. In the round, the subject to conditions, the assessment concludes that the proposed development satisfies the requirements of the development plan when taken as a whole and would be acceptable in relation to the effects on the environment. Recommendation is that the development should be approved subject to conditions, and these would control the scale, layout and design of the site to that in the plans, restrict the seasonal use of the site to April to September, would limit the duration of any one occupancy of any purchase so that there's a turnover of availability on the site for tourist accommodation, tourist use, and there would be a requirement to mitigate effects through the submission and agreement of details on external lighting, access and grassland management. That concludes the presentation. The recommendation is per 0.31 on the report, I think it is, and I'm happy to take any questions. My colleague Anne Napier is online.
Thank you, Morag and Anne, for that extensive report. Can I open this out to members of the board for any questions or comments? Councillor Hussain online.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thanks you, Morag, and the planning team for all the extensive report. In this area of special beauty obviously falls within my ward, and I know it very, very well. And I mean, the key planning issues that they were raised, I think, looking at the report and looking at the comments from our road department that says obviously formalizing the campsite area will help ensure that the site is managed in a responsible way, as well as Nature Scots saying that significant changes were made by the applicant to ensure environmental impact are minimized and, you know, obviously benefit to the campsite will bring to the area. Based on that, I'm minded to support the application and the fact that the applicant have worked with our planning department and the relevant agencies to make sure that the site is going ahead in a responsible manner. So I hope to support that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hussain, for those supporting remarks. Do members agree the recommendations? Oh, Vice Chair.
I'm just supporting Hussain here. I think it's an excellent development, and the developer should be commended for showing initiative and providing services for campsites rather than something that was a wild camping area. It's now something that's going to be developed and provide services for camper vans and caravanettes and etc. I'm happy to support this and approve it along with the usual conditions, of course, set out in Appendix 1.
Thank you, Councillor McKeever. So do members agree the recommendations at paragraph 3.1 to approve the application subject to conditions set out in Appendix 1 to this report?
Yeah,
Agreed?
happy to.
Thank you all for your time and attendance and, dare I say, endurance for this afternoon's meeting. And I wish you all a pleasant onward week. Thank you.
Thank you.